Hi everybody, welcome to another Screenwriting Tips. My name is Tony D and I'm here to tell you about today's topic, which is how to write a chase comedy. I'm really big on chase comedies. They were some of my favorite little movies. The subgenre is just so much fun because number one, it has comedy, but number two, it has car chases, and I love a good car chase. So what are the elements of a comedy chase? Obviously, the two I just mentioned, but more importantly, what you have to have is, beside the good comedy, you have to have a reason why the chase is happening. That's really the big thing. Now, since it's a comedy, you have a lot of flexibility there. My favorite chase comedy of all time is, of course, The Blues Brothers. It's a great setup. They're on a mission from God, and it's pretty much, open season right there. I mean, when the premise is they're on a mission from God, pretty much anything can happen, and almost anything does. The great thing about the movie is that they try to keep it mostly in the realm of reality. They do go out of that. There's a scene with the Nazis getting killed at the end. The fact that that chase goes on and on and on is justified because, God is overwatching the Blues Brothers and he wants them to succeed in their quest to save the orphanage. So, not only do you have the comedy element, which forgives a lot, but you also have this added extra bonus that justifies why the Blues Brothers can do all these insane things and get away with it. Plus, since the way the movie opens with Jake getting out of jail, these guys are no strangers to getting in trouble. So, but you'll notice that the Blues Brothers starts pretty somberly, because Jake's getting out of jail and it's a pretty serious scene. And the first thing they do when Jake gets out of jail is they go see the Penguin and go back to the orphanage and find out the bad news that the orphanage is going to be closed down. And that sort of depresses them. They end up going to church, and that's when Jake has his moment and God tells him, that they're going to get the band back together. And hold on, Joan is here. Say hi, Joan. So, another great chase comedy, I don't know if it's great, but I like it, is Cannonball Run with Burt Reynolds, if you've ever seen that. That movie is probably more chase than comedy because the whole movie is based upon this fictional race across the country that happens every year that a group of characters do, I think, to win money. And obviously they all break the speed limit, and they're not really going after one particular person. It's a race, but, then they have all these ways that they're sabotaging each other or trying to get one up on each other, so it's a competition. So, ultimately, that movie is more silly than anything else. If you compare it to the Blues Brothers, I would say the Blues Brothers is more cohesive in its structure because there's one goal in the Blues Brothers, whereas a Cannonball Run, goal's kind of more nebulous. Yeah, they all want to win the race. It's kind of like the wacky races, but there's a lot of people who could win. It's not like there's one person who desperately needs the money and they really have to win and everybody else is a jerk or something. It's kind of everybody's in the mix on that one. Jackie Chan's in that movie. I think he's in the first one or the second one. I forget. Midnight Run is another one. Charles Grodin, Robert De Niro. The premise in that is way grounded in reality, although it is a comedy. So there's no super crazy moments in that one, but it's very funny. So within the confines of reality, you can find a lot of humor. One of the running gags in the movie is Robert De Niro is one step ahead of a federal agent, and he keeps stealing his ID and using his name, and they're just one step behind him the whole time. There's gangsters trying to kill Charles Grodin because he was their accountant, and they end up. It's also a buddy movie too. Now, a chase movie doesn't necessarily have to be a buddy movie, but it often turns into one because the chase tends to isolate the characters, and something has to happen. So the buddy movie is sort of a classic way to get characters together and have them talk to each other and then eventually come to some sort of resolution. You're not going to see a tremendous amount of chase comedies that are very, very serious. I guess Midnight Run would be about as serious as you can get and still be a comedy, just because it takes place in reality. They don't always work. There was one with, it was god-awful, and I forget the name of it, but it was Robert Downey Jr. and Zach Galifianakis, and I hated that movie. Just thought it was brutally bad. And again, that was more of like a buddy movie. Not really a chase movie, but it was kind of a road trip movie. And there's been a lot of awful ones. Chase comedies are kind of out of vogue, partly because comedy really is out of vogue in movies in the United States. Can't make a joke about anything anymore without everybody on Twitter getting bent out of shape. And, if you're thinking of writing a chase comedy, and I've written quite a few of them because I'm a big fan of the genre, and a lot of my spec scripts were written many years ago. So, that's back when, it was fun to make, a comedy. These days, everybody's so PC. Hollywood has especially embraced the whole PC culture, and it's really, really, I think, harmed comedy in a big way. I think they're not willing to take as many chances as they once were. But that being said, I think Hollywood's just waiting for the cultural tide to turn. Nobody wants to be the first person to sort of break through and turn the boat around, because I think that the first few people who do that do get penalized. Their careers do get damaged, and they don't really turn things around completely, but they kind of start to. So I think, I just made a joke this week in my Super Frat comic about Kevin Hart, and I think Kevin Hart kind of got a little bit railroaded by the Oscars and their whole attitude about an old joke he made, which he already apologized for. I felt it was extreme, but it wasn't really a turnaround. But at the same time, Kevin's career seems fine. It's not like he's been destroyed. It's sort of almost a draw. So that may be the high watermark of the cultural war against comedy. And maybe from then on in, we're going to see things start to slowly shift back to some kind of normalcy. But I don't know. Maybe not. There's still a lot of incidents out there. And see how the tone of the entire video has changed now? I was so excited at the beginning about talking about chase comedies, and now I'm kind of down and out. Because it is sad. It is sad that so many people on Twitter are so insecure with their own personal lives, and I think it stems from a place of insecurity, that they need to tear down people who are having fun, because I think ultimately, I think we've all been insecure at some point in our lives. I know I have. And when you hear people laughing, a lot of times I think your first instinct is to say, are those people laughing at me? And if you're in a really bad place in your life and you think that, you can convince yourself that that's the case and then get really mad at those people. And if you have a way to strike out that's sort of petty and easy, like it is on Twitter, it's easy to strike out on Twitter and cause somebody a lot of pain, pain on the internet, whatever that's worth. So, people's Twitter, people's YouTube, people's social media get attacked every day now. It was a one-time thing back in the day for only the truly extreme and the truly, mean. People who are hardcore racists that harass people or dox people. Those are the people you go after, not like some rando who just happened to say something. Maybe it was off color, maybe it wasn't politically incorrect completely. Now they go after people with equal vigor who are totally hardcore racists, who are basically, just people who are stupid, who said something weird and odd, or, maybe it's racist, maybe it's not. I was just talking to a friend about Megyn Kelly and, what she said about blackface. And yeah, nobody would agree with her. But at the same time, she seems just, to me, kind of a stupid person who might, say something like that. And is she like into KKK? I don't think so. So, if we can't forgive people for being stupid, there's going to be a lot of people kicked off Twitter. Pretty much everybody, eventually. This is all going to end, I think, very poorly for the platforms who have embraced this. But man, that was a big divergence, wasn't it? Let me get back to chase comedies. Okay. So the 3-act structure works well for the chase. The first act, obviously, you introduce the characters, you introduce the problem, and the chase kind of just starts. I think in the Blues Brothers, it sort of starts, it's kind of snowballs. It starts very slowly. Nobody's really chasing them in the beginning, because in the first part of the movie, they're putting the band back together, and you're getting to know Jake and Elwood and the band. The second part of it, the second act, is more of them putting the band back together and doing the first performance with the band, which they sort of scam their way into, and that starts to piss people off and get them to chase Elwood and Jake. And then by the end of the movie, it's like they're doing this big concert, they're finally making the money, and then it's a chase between the people who are mad at them, including the authorities, and trying to get the money in time for to save the orphanage. So, in a typical sort of like movie like Midnight Run, initially it just starts off very normal, in that Robert De Niro is a bounty hunter. He's got to take Charles Grodin, or he captures Charles Grodin. He's got to take him back. And then along the way, things get complicated because there are guys looking for Grodin and trying to kill him. The feds are looking for him, and they don't know who to trust. So then the second act is mostly about them trying to figure out what they're going to do, who they can trust. De Niro at first isn't really warming up to Grodin, but slowly he does and realizes there's more to this situation. He can't just turn him over because he's probably going to be killed, or he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. So De Niro at the end, spoiler, decides that he's a good guy. Anyhow, if you're writing a chase movie, you need those sort of character acts. You can't just have a chase. Although the chase is very important, and you want to think about what kind of chase it is. It's a lot harder to do a chase movie these days because there's satellite technology, drone technology. Cops have all sorts of ways to track you down. So, when you think about that, you can then sort of figure out your movie. So you may decide that having your characters chased by the cops is too hard to do. So you have them chased by, say, drug dealers, right? I believe that is the plot in, what is it? God, I can't think of the name of the movie. Jason Sudeikis, Jennifer Aniston, they all pose as a family, and they're working for drug dealers. They're working for a drug dealer who's played by Ed Helms. The hell is it? Meet the Smiths or Connors or something like that. And they are being chased, not really by the authorities, but more by they're worried about the drug dealers more than the cops. Although the cops are an element, they're not really looking for them actively. So that's a way to eliminate it. Like if the cops aren't looking for you actively, then it's reasonable to assume that you can pass through, most checkpoints with cameras, and they're not looking at every single person who travels everywhere to find you. Although slowly they're getting that technology. And you have to keep up on that. So if you're going to write something with law enforcement in it, you have to be aware of the current law enforcement technology. Once it's like a chase like it is in the Blues Brothers, in the Blues Brothers there were just cops and cars would pile up. But that movie took place in the 80s. So, they might have had chopper. I mean, I'm sure they had choppers, but police choppers chasing a suspect wasn't as big of a thing in the 80s. So, it was harder to capture someone who was just driving around in a car. I mean, it's still not easy, but it's a little easier to track the person in a car now with the technology they have. And they also have, slicker communication. The communication in the 80s was more radio based, and now it's more digital based. So even if a cop these days, his radio doesn't work for whatever reason, he probably has a cell phone and could call the station and call one of the other cops in another car if he had to. So I'm sure that the digital technology in a cop car is similarly boosted. Plus, a lot of cops have, a digital station right in the car. They can look up a suspect right there. They can write a check on you, and it's all tied into their network. And they have a way more access to information than they used to. So you have to keep that in mind if you're going to add a law enforcement element to your story in the modern day. And if you're not, then you have to figure out, I mean, one of the things I always end up figuring out in a chase comedy is how do people get behind, because a lot of times you need that. You need the protagonist to get ahead of the bad guys and disappear for a while, but then there's got to be a way for them to pick up on their trail later on when you need the villains there for a final confrontation. So those are things you have to work on. You have to think, well, if one of the villains or the cops have access to a smartphone tracker, it's extremely hard for you to lose a cop if they're tracing you by your cell phone, because they're going to find you. So that's a thing to consider. If it's just some knucklehead trying, who doesn't have any access to that, then he can't chase you down that easily. He has to, rely on other sources. But then the question is, how does a regular guy track down your protagonist, right? If he doesn't have access to that, then he's got to have, some ability to know where the characters are. And you have to think that stuff through. And, a lot of times I see clients and their stories, and they don't necessarily think everything all the way through. You have to play characters to the height of their intelligence, because somebody sitting in the audience is going to figure it out. Somebody in the audience might say, hey, why doesn't he just, do X, Y, and Z? That's how you find a person in that situation. And you don't have to address every single middling concern in a movie. I mean, keep in mind, it's only 90 minutes long. So, you don't have to show characters constantly going to the bathroom or eating or anything like that. Although it's sometimes, if you're showing characters over a period of time on a long trip, you might want to show that once in a while to at least imply that it happens. It kind of depends on how fast the chase is and, what kind of distance and time you're talking about. Obviously, if you have the characters constantly in the car the entire movie and they never get out, and the movie takes place over several days, people are going to start to think, well, why don't they stop for gas once in a while, or food, or bathroom breaks. But you could do that with a simple, I mean, there's often, that's a key component of the chase, is the stop. Where do the characters stop to gas up or get information or move the story forward? the main thing to remember is every scene in a movie, even in a chase movie, has to move the story forward. You only have 90 minutes. You only have a handful of characters. You got to move it forward. And also keep in mind, too, that these movies are not inexpensive to produce, usually. A chase comedy is going to have stunts, typically. I mean, I guess it's possible not to have any major stunts, but really, there's probably going to be cars involved, and there's probably going to be car stunts involved. And they're dangerous, and they cost a lot of money to do. So, you know, if you're writing a movie, understand that it's really tough to be a low-budget movie and a chase comedy. They're not really in vogue. You're probably going to need some big names in them, which is going to make the movie even more expensive. You're going to need stunts, and you're going to need unique stunts. You know, you can't just do the same old car chases that have been done like a million times. You got to mix it up. I mean, that was one of the great things in the Blues Brothers movie. They did their car chase in a mall, and that was different. I don't think it had ever been done. I don't think so. I can't think of it. And, you know, if you watch the chase enough, and I've seen the movie like 100 times, you can see you can see that they took a bunch of, you know, they built a ramp, and then they took a bunch of merchandise to hide the ramp, and then you see the car go right over the ramp to turn it on its side. And, you know, it's pretty cheesy in that respect. Like, but a movie like that, it didn't have to be slick, as long as it was funny and the pacing was good, the dialogue was snappy, and it just moved along. You know, even though a lot of those stunts were just crazy, wild stuff, it wasn't about being slick or cool. It was about the comedy, and that drove it. And that's what you had to think for your movie too. So if you're doing a chase comedy, you know, there has to be enough seriousness in it to warrant the chase, but not so much that it drags down the movie and drags down the comedy, you know? And so the 3-act structure works really well. You move it forward, the characters have an arc, and then the chase ends at some point and they get to their goal, and they have the final confrontation, whatever it is. So that's it. That's it. So get out there and write some chase comedies, because God knows I'll go see them. And let's hope that this dark time for comedy ends very soon, so we can all write our comedy screenplays and comedy stuff and don't have to hear these babies on the internet pissing and moaning about it. My name is Tony D. I'm a screenwriter. You can check me out on Patreon. Still, I haven't gotten off of it yet. May go to Subscribestar at some point. I'm also have comics on the Webcomic Factory and Superfrat. Thank you for watching. Joan thanks you for watching. And we'll see you next time on Screenwriting Tips.